UK in a changing Europe. Morning, Anand. Good to see you. Is this going to be a Brexit betrayal by the back door? It certainly looks like it's moving in that direction.
I mean, to be honest, absolutely not, because the one thing that Keir Starmer is about all things, and particularly about Brexit, I think, is cautious. And all he's talking about when it comes to the European Union is a little bit of tinkering around the edges of Boris Johnson's deal. Nothing more than that. He's explicitly ruled out single market membership, customs union membership, anything like that. He's simply talking about some very, very light touch fixes, as he would see it, to what Boris Johnson agreed.
Have put forward this proposal, and you'll have read about it, whereby countries can be almost associate members of the European Union, which would mean they'd have to pay into the European Union, they'd have to accept EU laws, and of course it would mean free movement of people. That may be very attractive to very, very many people in a Labour government. I include in that the leader, Keir Starmer, who was the architect of the second referendum plan.
Well, I mean, several things about the paper that came out yesterday. The first thing to note is it wasn't a paper that was meant to be about us. It was a paper essentially about how they deal with the challenge of enlarging to countries like Ukraine. We were a sort of afterthought in one paragraph towards the end. And yes, they did talk about associate membership, but I think a lot of the authors of that report have gone on today in public to say it's all very hypothetical because Keir Starmer has ruled out single market membership. So clearly this is not something that Keir Starmer, at the moment at least, is willing to countenance, because he said that's simply not something that's on his agenda.
You would prefer him to go further, though, wouldn't you?
Well, I don't think my preference is one way or the other. What I would say, though, is I think what he's doing is trying to respect what he sees as Brexit red lines around freedom of movement, about Britain being a rule taker across the board, and saying, what I'd like to do is try and make the deal we have work a little bit better. And what he's proposing are steps to make the transport of live animals and meat products across borders a little bit easier than they would otherwise be. It's not an absolute game changer. It'll make the life of some farmers and traders a little bit easier than they currently are, that's all.
So, as the director of UK in a changing Europe, what would you like to see our relationship be with Europe as we go forward? And with that in mind, who would you like to see in number 10?
Well, as the director of UK in a changing Europe, sadly, I'm not allowed to express personal opinions because we're simply meant to assess what's going on, not to try and lobby in favour of one outcome or the other. I would like, if you really want to know, a little bit of honesty about what Brexit means and what people intend from Brexit. So if you take Keir Starmer's proposals, for instance, what I find frustrating is the subtext to this is the Labour Party saying we are going to tackle the problem of growth by improving our relationship with the European Union. The sorts of things that the Labour Party is proposing will not have a massive impact on growth. We know where the Brexit impact comes from. It comes from being outside the single market. For some people, quite legitimately, being outside the single market makes sense because they're opposed to freedom of movement, they're opposed to paying money to the European Union, they're opposed to being a rule taker. But we should at least be clear and honest and open about what the terms of this debate are, and they are a trade-off between political autonomy and trade, therefore economic growth.
Just briefly, what do you make of the fact Tony Blair is looming large behind the scenes? A lot of his former staff work, as you know, in Keir Starmer's private office, and it's pretty clear he helped broker that meeting with Macron, which was quite a coup for Starmer to be there in the Elysee Palace with the French president.
I mean, Tony Blair certainly has influential friends in high places. There's no doubt about that. And he's certainly doing what he can to, as he sees it, help Keir Starmer. I don't think we should assume that there is some kind of Blairite plot here to take over the Labour Party under Keir Starmer. I mean, the fact that people who worked for Blair now work for Starmer is neither here nor there. I'm sure there are people who used to work for David Cameron who work in or around Rishi Sunak's number 10. I mean, that's just how political parties work. I think the fact of the matter is, I mean, the interesting and important thing about the Starmer visit, I think, is that Keir Starmer is trying to look prime ministerial now. He's gained the confidence to go out there and say, look, I want people to see photos of me with President Macron and think of me as a head of government, not simply as a head of opposition. I think that speaks to the fact that the Labour Party is becoming a little bit more assertive now than maybe it has been in the past.
OK, thank you. Fascinating, actually. Professor Anand Menon there, thank you.